So maybe your first question would be, give us a state of just your tribes. Madison has just been designated in December, Truax Field, as the home of F35A. Doctor, can you start? Give us an overview. WisconsinEye is interviewing officials on the front lines of the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And Sara Meaney, director of the State Department of Tourism, is right on those front lines. And she's joined WisconsinEye for a pre-Memorial Day interview. Secretary Meaney, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you know what it said, that you've got a fun job at a tough time. Would you agree that is that a fair description?
Yeah, I don't think anyone would have, predicted this going into a role like this, that we would see 2019 be the best year on record for Wisconsin tourism, and then right on the heels of that, 2020 happening the way it is. So without question, it's still an honor to be able to support such an important industry for the state at one of the toughest times, certainly in our lifetime.
Well, that's a follow-up question. How do you promote tourism in Wisconsin in the season of COVID-19? And is there any good news? I thought I caught a Wisconsin Public Radio story in which you spoke in central Wisconsin and talked about a decline in the number of commercial flights. Is that good news?
So there are a few reasons for us to remain optimistic. I mean, without question, COVID-19 has decimated businesses throughout the tourism industry all over the state. In fact, the U.S. Travel Association has reported that weekly travel spending reductions in Wisconsin since the week ending March 14th have totaled $1.7 billion in lost travel spending in Wisconsin alone. So, on the heels of 2019 being such a strong year, 2020 is already shaping up to be just heartbreaking everywhere you look and everywhere you turn. But yes, there is reason for optimism. So here's where I'm going to start with silver lining, although please. I'm not sure dealing with a global pandemic has many. Wisconsin's very well positioned for a potential rebound when it comes to tourism. Now, leisure travel was among the first and hardest hit industries, certainly in our state, but globally we've seen that all over the place. Of course, flight traffic has changed and significantly dropped. Hotel and lodging is the lowest, frankly, any of us have seen, ranging from between 3 and 25% occupancy, which is unheard of, even in a shoulder season. And as a result, spending in all business categories is down significantly. But the reason for optimism is a few things. One, Wisconsin's recreation offering, particularly outdoor recreation offering, is incredibly fortuitous at a time when people are changing what they're looking for and changing what they see as being their options for safe and healthy travel for themselves and their family. We have half of our state is covered in forest. We have over 15,000 lakes. We have tens of thousands of miles of streams and rivers. A lot of space for people to spread out and roam and still check out an amazing state once it's safe to do so. So that's one reason for optimism. Our actual offering lends itself well to the types of things people are going to be looking to do for quite a long time. I mean, traditionally, the tourism industry is bolstered by large events, fairs, parades, festivals, and things like that. Yep. And of course, these are hallmarks of things like Memorial Day weekend. And until those types of events return, the tourism industry is going to need to continue to be creative with how we safely and appropriately welcome people back to the state and encourage spending in our businesses and our communities.
Well, as you mentioned, 2019 was a record year, $13.7 billion in direct visitor spending, which triggered $22.2 billion in direct and indirect. Do you know enough about, or do you have an estimate of the percentage drop off in 2020, or are there too many wild cards out there?
Well, it certainly is hard to predict. It has everything to do, of course, with the path of how well we as a nation can actually lower the curve. Right now, it's predicted around 45% expected loss nationwide in travel and tourism. And of course, at $22.2 billion in economic impact last year, with a loss of direct spending, already 1.7 in 9 weeks alone. We're on our back foot already. Certainly, though, as we see improvements in the control and the reduced spread of the virus in Wisconsin and our surrounding states, because we have to keep in mind, where does the bulk of our visitation come from? Around 50% of our tourists are actually Wisconsinites. And then, of course, we see an influx from neighboring states. We've traditionally relied really heavily on driving arrivals as opposed to fly-in leisure travelers, which works in our favor in a situation like this. National level research is telling us that people have significantly changed the plans they have for travel if they plan to travel in the next 6 months. And those who do, 25% have said that they have switched from a flight destination to a drive destination, looking for safer, affordable, and accessible types of vacations for themselves and their family and their loved ones.
I'm just curious, after the Supreme Court ruling knocking down the governor's safer at home order, national footage, we were shown, let me get this straight, taverns opened with no social distancing minutes after the Supreme Court threw out the safer at home rule. Do those videos hurt your ability to promote tourism in Wisconsin?
Well, it certainly doesn't make anyone's job easier to make people feel comfortable that consumer confidence can rebound quickly.
Right.
But I think it's important that we take stories like that in context, right? So what we do have is consumer, traveler sentiment, a service provider that we have worked with for quite a few years, Longwoods International, has been doing a consumer traveler sentiment study for the last 10 weeks, and it's available publicly. And what it basically has told us is that people have changed the way they travel, and yet probably about 2/3 of those people still aren't comfortable with the idea of things opening back up.
Okay.
Other independent studies are also telling us the same. So while we see the actions of a few, we have to not mistake those as the sentiment of many. The majority of people are still very much taking cautious steps in the direction of doing the things that they would like to do or resume some of their activities that were previously in the normal category. What we have to do is take outlying examples as outliers and not simply representative of what it is that a majority of business owners, customers, and visitors, as well as residents in Wisconsin, actually believe to be the best steps.
I'm so glad that we're doing this interview before the Memorial Day holiday, which is a traditional kickoff of our summer vacation tourism season. But let me ask you, how will this Memorial Day in Wisconsin be different?
Well, certainly we already know a lot of us look forward to Memorial Day parades and celebrating Memorial Day for what it stands for and why it's so important. Many of us are going to need to be a bit more creative with how we celebrate Memorial Day, since parades are canceled and large event gatherings are not recommended by any public health entities, whether it's statewide, local, or the CDC. So it's important to keep in mind why those recommendations are in place. When we make choices to put ourselves and our family near other folks, we have to keep in mind what keeps us safe and what helps us keep them safe. We're all in the same community here, whether we are in a town, a city, or a state together. We really actually need to be able to work together to uplift this recovery. And so we are asking and recommending that people during not just this holiday Memorial Day weekend, when they think about what their weekend recreation plans might look like, please keep in mind that the reason for those public health restrictions in the first place still exists. The risk of spreading or contracting the virus still exists. And when we move around or move to other areas of the state, we increase the chances of potentially getting or spreading the virus to communities that are not in the same position as we might be to be able to take care of those who may fall ill.
Well,
mind in balance, right? What we want and what we like and what we would like to do versus what the risk is to ourselves and to our neighbors in our community are important considerations. So we really do recommend that people get outside. Go do things you love in your own community. Support the businesses that need your support more than ever. get a picnic takeout breakfast or lunch or dinner from a restaurant that needs your dollars today, and go and enjoy some of the weather that it looks like we may be having this weekend in hopefully most of the state.
Well, are you telling Bears fans from Illinois and Viking fans from Minnesota, don't come here this holiday weekend? I don't hear you saying that.
In encouraging or promoting travel. In fact, the timing is kind of an interesting thing. Normally, right around this time, the Department of Tourism would have kicked off its traditional summer advertising campaign for peak travel season. We have pressed pause on that until it is advised and reasonable to encourage travel. Now, that is not to say that not talking about how great Wisconsin is stops people from wanting to come here. However, what we're not doing is actively promoting travel currently. We are recommending, according to public health recommendations and guidelines, that people recreate within their own communities until it is safe to travel further afield. And the same applies to those states that people may be coming from. If people are leaving states that are still closed, the reason for that closure still exists. Those are all reasons why we need to continue to practice social distancing, physical barrier, wearing a mask, whether you know you're sick or not, and really being responsible citizens.
Okay, so, but you're recommending that, and I'm really glad you listed that if out-of-staters come here over the Memorial Day weekend, they bring some of those items, masks, gloves, hand sanitizers. But let me ask you this. Should out-of-state residents, should they be ready to be questioned, let me even say hassled, if they choose, number one, to come and wear a mask or not wear a mask?
I don't think I'd ever recommend that anyone hassle anyone for their choices.
Okay.
It's very important that we keep in mind is that while we all do have choices, that's exactly what they are. Being able to make a choice that is in our own best interest and the best interest of our communities and public health at large is an important balance that we all need to consider. No one wants people to travel in Wisconsin more than I. At least I don't think they do. It happens to be my number one reason for my role, right? But that does not mean that that goes out of balance for the reasons for public health recommendations for our own health and safety and for the health and safety of our neighbors in our community.
And when you say you're not encouraging travel this Memorial weekend, does that also apply to Wisconsin residents who may have a second home or a cottage up north?
Well, the same philosophy applies, of course, which is that where you live today and the resources that are available to you today and your potential exposure to having been near the virus, or you may not have it, or there may be people in the community where you have a seasonal home or rental. The idea is keeping control over the spread of the virus has everything to do with our ability to manage infection if and when it occurs. This is exactly what the public health experts have been telling us about all along. Lowering the curve isn't necessarily proof that the virus is gone. It's proof that we have slowed it to a point where we can actually manage infections as they happen, whether it's hospital beds or life-saving equipment for those people. So the same philosophy applies, of course, whether you're from Illinois and coming up to the Burlington area where you may have a cabin, or whether you're from Madison and going up to Vilas County. The communities that are smallest and have year-round residents that may be more at risk are very much aware of the fact that their risk greatly increases when the volume of people from outside their region increases past their ability to manage and maintain the health risk, not to mention the supply chain. So many of these things have been affected all along as a result of changes in spending, changes in consumer behavior. All of these things are part of the equation, and that is why we are not proactively encouraging travel at this time until we reach some more of those public health milestones that many of us have heard so much about.
Yeah, which leads me to this follow-up question. I fully understand you're not recommending or encouraging travel through Memorial Day, but what about the other benchmarks, 4th of July and Labor Day? Put on your futurist hat. How far do you think, excuse me.
I don't have a futurist hat. And what I will say is the virus doesn't have a timeline that they've published for us to reference. The issue, of course, is how well have we been able to prove that we can control the spread and manage the healthcare resources in order to take care of folks as they may become ill. So the challenge here is I don't have a good answer for you because there is no specific timeline. It has everything to do with our ability to meet those public health milestones in order to identify whether we can move through those gating criteria, which, by the way, were set forth largely by the guidelines of the CDC at the federal level. So what we have to keep in mind is reducing spread of the virus requires people to not move around and social distance to reduce spread from person to person. So what does that mean for the Secretary of Tourism to be saying right now? It means if you plan to recreate on a beautiful weekend, whether it be Memorial Day or the 4th of July, we need to be very cognizant of what that means for our health and the health of those around us. And if we are good citizens to each other as humans, and we are able to reduce the spread of the virus, the sooner we can actually get back to some of the things that we love and miss the most.
As the, I'll use the term Secretary of Fun, what was your reaction to the Supreme Court ruling striking down safer at home?
Well, it's interesting to be in the role that I'm in. Tourism doesn't have a political party associated with it. Economic development simply is an action that all of our communities benefit from. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that the message that I'm sharing today and the message of tourism in general is we want economic recovery to happen. Our businesses rely on the support and dollars of their patrons. We can actually be very good stewards and local tourists in our community by spending the dollars in our community that we may have otherwise spent in another community. So the Supreme Court decision, while it removed the safer at home emergency order, did not remove COVID-19 from our state. So we still need to keep in mind public health guidance. We need to make good choices for ourselves and for our neighbors and for our family and our loved ones. And hopefully sooner rather than later, we can get to a place where encouraging travel is the norm rather than waiting to do so.
The regional debate to this, the number of positives in the 5-county Milwaukee metro area is 50% of all positives statewide. The number of deaths, tragically, all death is tragic, is two-thirds of those are in those 5 counties. So my question is, isn't our traditional tourist meccas, Door County, Monaco, and the Dells, are they more willing to accept in-state and out-of-state visitors, both in Memorial Day and as we look ahead for 2 to 3 months? The regional part of this debate, ma'am.
Well, I think you have to keep in mind where the bulk of our visitors actually come from. Chicago has traditionally been our largest metropolitan area market. And for those of you who are watching at home, Chicago still has a lot of challenges ahead, as does Milwaukee. Now, interestingly, what we did see in 2019 is that of the many metropolitan areas that are tourists in the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee is nearly neck and neck with Chicago. So I'm going to put the question back to you or to anyone else who would like to think about it. Until we have better control over the spread of this virus, where do you want your visitors to be coming from? And do you have a choice? Yeah. And in reality, we have to think about what that means. This isn't about a game or about control. This is about public health. And those numbers that you referenced, those are people, right? And we have to keep in mind that that's really what this is actually about. Tourism is about people, and tourism is about the experience of people with other people. We need to keep that in mind and be responsible with the recommendations that we make based on science and based on public health recommendations.
I want to ask.
This has a choice. All of that is always true, and that will always remain true. We have a choice. And yet what we need to do is make responsible choices on ourselves, on our own behalf, and on behalf of the people who live near us.
I want to ask you about one region, Wisconsin Dells, the water capital of the world. Unique set of circumstances. How are you seeing their season playing out?
Well, Wisconsin Dells has for a very long time been a real leader in Wisconsin's tourism offering. And without question, the leaders of the Wisconsin Dells tourism industry and I have been in regular communication, and I think it's been a challenge. We've all really been we've been challenged by this situation, and it's been heartbreaking to see the effect that it has on each of these individual businesses and attractions. But we also have to keep in mind why the Wisconsin Dells became such a mecca. Part of it is the natural resources and the natural beauty of the area, which all still remain very healthy and available to everyone. And then, of course, you have the built environment, which put Wisconsin Dells truly on the map. And so the decisions being made, which are rightfully those decisions made by the business owners themselves, to open or not open based on what they themselves can do or what they can do on behalf of their employees or their customers, that's a tough decision for anyone to make in either direction, to open or to not open. It's often a financial decision, it's an emotional decision, and it's truly one of the hardest decisions many of these people have ever made, and that's exactly what they've shared with me. So, what does it mean for Wisconsin Dells in terms of revenue? Well, they're going to see a drop in revenue, and that is more a reflection of consumer confidence and comfort in their ability to travel anywhere right now. But to be able to hope for a recovery, what we're relying on is safe and healthy reopening processes and procedures that members of the industry and leaders of the industry worked with us directly to actually create through what was published by the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. So a lot of collaboration went into those recommendations, which were created in order to have a situation in which business owners and leaders can make strong, well-informed public health decisions with their businesses and their destinations. So the tools are in place. The responsible decisions are ultimately up to us as individuals and to business owners and leaders to make on behalf of their customers and employees.
What about, and I'm going to use a trite phrase, what about the traditional and the legendary mom and pop resorts who may only have 5 or 6 cabins? And the summer season is so important. How are they positioned or not positioned to survive this season?
Well, again, it's a philosophical question. It's a decision for each mom and pop resort owner. And I know, so many who run these businesses and they've been in the family, these businesses in this land has been in the family for generation after generation.
That's right.
The decision is no less difficult for a business of that size than it is for a major water park, frankly. It's just more zeros at the end on the size of revenue, either gain or loss. I think ultimately it comes down to the priorities that are placed by those business owners and those proprietors on what it takes to be able to make it through to the next season if they decide not to open, or what it would take to be able to open safely and keep their employees and their guests safe and healthy. And it's a balance that no one has had to make before. There are extraordinary measures that businesses will need to take just in order to sustain a healthy environment. So it's every story I've heard is heartbreaking. And these decisions are hard, really hard. And ultimately, each person, each business owner, and each visitor is making a choice every day.
Are you finding on behalf of both on one end of the continuum, the mom and pop resort owners, and at the other end, the Kalaharis and the large Dells resorts, are they accepting and embracing the idea we have to do things much differently to protect, number one, our customers, the fun seekers, and number two, our employees? Is there a universal acceptance of the need to act to protect the health and safety?
Oh, by and large, the majority of business owners themselves believe in the importance and the priority to be placed on the health and safety guidances that are put in place. A lot of time and energy was put into those guidances by the business owners and business leaders themselves. There doesn't appear to be a gap in understanding of what it takes to reopen and protect employees and visitors and customers. It's a lot of work, and that work also takes money and time. So it's challenging, but for the most part, the majority of business owners totally agree and have been waiting for and seeking those guidances in order to make those decisions wisely and appropriately.
Let's talk about the impact on the drop in tourism for Milwaukee, where you're from. Potentially no Brewers fans in Miller Park. The Summerfest delayed. Don't know if it'll draw the same numbers. Ethnic festivals canceled. The governor on Monday said there may be a virtual, very conditional, virtual Democratic convention, and who knows about the state fair. Talk about the impact on Milwaukee and Milwaukee County, please.
Well, I think we all were looking forward to 2020 as being a game changer, not just for Milwaukee, but for the state of Wisconsin for many reasons. The DNC being one, Ryder Cup, which is still currently scheduled to take place in September, is another. Right. But, last year's state fair hit record numbers, and Summerfest, with the changes to their model for this summer, still had a great, and has a great opportunity to recoup what otherwise could have been lost. I think what people are looking to do is optimize what is possible up to and until the point where the ultimate decision has to be made, whether to sustain activities, postpone them, move virtual where it's possible and revenue collection can take place, or cancel until next year. And again, I think we're starting to see a trend in these decisions. The closer we get to the edge of summer and the closer we get to some of these prime activity and event timelines. But really, there's no tea leaves, and no one has information more than anyone else. It's a decision that is ultimately based on business necessity, risk tolerance, and risk and revenue balance. And ultimately, I think what we're seeing is a lot of people doing some of the hardest decisions they've ever had to make, choosing to either postpone or cancel altogether. In many cases, some folks are holding out a little bit longer and saying, we're going to wait till the very last minute before we have to make that last deposit payment or confirm, the last vendor. Yeah. Or even, sign all these contracts. And in each of these cases, it's really, the best of a bad lot. How do we make the most of what is possible and imagine a post-COVID scenario? I think what we can hope for is a return to some categories of things that resemble what we used to love to do in the summer. But it certainly is with a reduction of events, a reduction of large gatherings, the absence of festivals and things like that, which have been traditionally, the height of summer. Every street fair and festival, every live band outside may look different, and it will look different for a while. And this isn't unique to Wisconsin. I know you know this, but it's something we all have to kind of keep in mind and keep in perspective. Okay. Everyone in the country is dealing with this challenge. And we're seeing a variety of ways, but frankly, at the core, most of the decisions are rooted in the same thing. And that is, how do we make the best possible decision on behalf of people? And let the economy, and continue to find ways for the economy to recover.
Just two final questions because we're almost out of time. The governor is getting $1.9 billion in federal COVID response money from Washington. He's now allotted 1.2, 1.3. Has your tourism department asked for a chunk of the remaining $600 million? And if so, how much?
Well, so tourism's been advocating, the department has been advocating on behalf of the extended tourism economy in multiple different ways. So for example, when the state level support bill was out, there was a $5 million package for two different grant funds that was not taken up or passed by the legislature. That was kind of round one of the attempt to find dollars for the tourism industry directly. We're shaking every tree we possibly can. Now, I think one way we need to look at this is how closely tourism and WEDC has been working and continues to work. So I believe just yesterday, I don't even remember what day it is, earlier this week, the governor did announce a $75 million fund of grants to small businesses of 20 or fewer employees. Many of those businesses are going to be tourism-related businesses, whether they are restaurants, whether they are, specialty retail, whether they are small resorts. those businesses that have an opportunity to receive these grants certainly represent a portion or are representative of many tourism-related businesses. So until the eligibility requirements are finalized for that program, I think we have to see how else it may shake out. But ultimately, that is a great opportunity for small businesses to be able to have a bit of a boost up during a time where things are really, really challenging. And I know, Secretary Missy Hughes spoke a lot of service and, kind of hospitality leading businesses in that situation, because frankly, that's a piece of the economy that was hit hardest. And so the need is great in that category, which of course translates into tourism or tourism adjacent businesses.
Right. And the final question, just quickly, how's the Secretary of Tourism and her family going to spend the holiday weekend?
We're going camping approximately 100 yards that way in our backyard. We're hoping for some good weather. We rustled up the tents. They might be a little bit musty. We're trying to figure out what the weather is going to shape up to be like. We've had so much rain, it's going to be tough. But the bet that we're putting, if this takes place this weekend or another weekend, the bet is how many of the 6 of us actually lasted all the way through to the next morning versus sneaking back into our own cozy beds. So fingers crossed we have enough s'mores and yard games to keep us all busy, but that's what we're hoping to do.
The Secretary of Tourism and her family will be staying home during this holiday weekend. Sara Meaney is the Secretary of the Department of Tourism. Thank you so much for the update. Going into the Memorial Day weekend, the kickoff of vacation in summer. We'll check back in a little bit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Be well.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm John Henkes, President of WisconsinEye Public Affairs Network, and I'm speaking to you today to ask for your financial support. For 14 years, WisconsinEye has provided uninterrupted, gavel-to-gavel live coverage from our state capitol, the legislature, the Supreme Court, the governor's office. We're proud to continue to do that and continue through this time of crisis with important coverage. We are 100% committed to bringing these important meetings into your home or place of work. We've created online pathways that allow us to connect you live with these important events. But WisconsinEye needs your help to do so. At this time, we are facing unprecedented staffing, technical, and financial challenge. So if you rely on our coverage to stay informed on issues you care and need to know about, I ask that you consider a one-time charitable gift today to help us through this challenge. Whether you're following the DHS briefings, the Wisconsin Elections Commission, or leadership briefings from the state capitol, or any of the timely interviews conducted by our senior producer, Steve Walters, we could use your support today. If just a fraction of the thousands who value WisconsinEye coverage say yes, with a gift of any size, it will provide a huge boost. So thank you. To donate, please text WisEye to 44321. That's WISEYE to 44321, or visit wiseye.org/donate, WISEYE.org/donate. Or you could send a check to 122 West Washington Avenue, Suite 200, Madison, Wisconsin, 53703. Again, thank you so much. Please be safe. Stay optimistic. We are Wisconsin.
This program is a production of WisconsinEye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. WisconsinEye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civic broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.